Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Carlson from Tucker Hall. I'm here to talk about Cuba. For hundreds of years, the native peoples of the Caribbean would travel back and forth between the islands of the Caribbean and what is now Florida. But the first recorded history between the United States and Cuba was 1528, almost 500 years ago. The Narvaez expedition from Spain landed in Havana and then came up to what is now, anybody know where they landed? St. Petersburg. Anybody know that the history of the United States, European history of the United States and Cuba started in St. Petersburg, in Coffee Pot Bayou? Everybody knows the history of Vicente Ybor, who was Cuban, moved to Key West and then to Tampa, built the cigar capital around us that's here today. But the bigger story of Ybor and the Tampa Bay area in Cuba is the founding father of Cuba, Jose Marti, who was, they say, like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln all rolled into one. But he gave many speeches here in Tampa, raised money here, and gave his most important speech here in 1893. This is a very historic moment in Cuban history and our history. 1999 was my first visit to Cuba. I went with a group of people from 32 countries and studied what was going on in Cuba and came away with two thoughts. One, we needed to re-engage Cuba in a big way. And number two, we needed to build entrepreneurial capitalism in Cuba as well. 2002, then Mayor Greco from Tampa went to Cuba, hoped to change the situation between Cuba and the U.S., and then President Bush reversed course and made the rules stricter, so we couldn't do that. But skip ahead to 2013, U.S. Representative Kathy Castor and others have gone down to Cuba. She helped push for re-engagement of flights between Tampa Bay and Cuba, and lots of other things, including a proposal to lift the embargo completely. The same year, 2013, the Tampa Chamber went for the first time. They've since been a couple other times, have been to the White House several times to push for the changes that President Obama made just a couple years ago. In 2014, December 17th, famous date in Cuban history, President Obama took down some of the restrictions between the United States and Cuba. And what he did essentially is to promote entrepreneurial trade between entrepreneurs in the United States and Cuba, to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Mayor Kreisman from St. Petersburg went late last year to ask the Cuban government to put a consulate in St. Petersburg. But a few months later, the mayor of Miami Beach, who's also running for governor of Florida, Phil Levine, went to Cuba and did the same thing. So we're not only competing with other cities around the country, now we're competing with Miami, who we thought was holding us back in some way. Some people look at the population in Cuba and say it's only 11 million people. This is the Rolling Stones concert, by the way. And they say, well, it's only 11 million people. Imagine 11 million people that don't have any of the household goods that you have at home. It's a huge buying market. Plus $1 billion of investment that will go there to build the tourism sector, a growing middle class. People have gone from earning $25 a month to $2,000, $3,000 a month. There's enormous buying power there. And because of the relaxation of restrictions in Cuba over the last few years, there are now 500,000 what they call cuentapropistas, independent entrepreneurial businesses owned by Cuban people, everything from watch repair to famous international restaurants and all kinds of things. And the U.S. government is trying to get us to work with them. Part of that is because of the new Wi-Fi hotspots and other things. The IT sector is growing quickly in Cuba. This is an app that helps direct people to the private restaurants in Cuba. Lots of changes. They're also building the port of the hemisphere that's going to be the main transshipment port for the region, outshining all these other ports in combination with the Chinese government, Brazilian government, probably Russians and others. Do you think it would be a good idea for our port to go visit Cuba at one point and maybe try to build trade between the top largest four ports in Florida have already done that? Thanks to Mayor Kreisman, you can go right now to the Morian Arts Center in St. Pete, and there's an exhibition of one of the most famous artists from Cuba there that you can see. This is what we call baseball diplomacy. Some of you may remember this. The Tampa Bay Rays were in Cuba a few months ago. I was lucky to be there. It was great to be able to see people wearing Rays hats and talking about Tampa Bay. The whole Cuban society was excited about it. Our firm, working with others, the Florida Humanities Council and others in Ybor City, created a thing called the Jose Marti Trail. There are Cuban visitors now coming to the United States to visit. There are Europeans and Asians coming to Cuba, and they want to visit the United States, ideally through Tampa Bay, so why not give them something to think about? I'll leave you with this. In 1930, an airline came to Tampa Bay and said, we want to build a regional hub for the Caribbean and Latin America in Tampa Bay with amphibious planes. Guess what Tampa said? We don't want the noise. So they went to Miami. The airline was Pan American, and it's now the Latin American hub for American Airlines. Do you think we ought to take advantage of this situation and not let another big opportunity pass us by? Please join me in helping to push that with re-engagement at Tampa Bay, the United States, and Cuba. Thank you.